Thank you, Mayor Spence, members of council. Neil Cernecki was brought on to the P4G Partnership for Growth project to kind of help us get it across the goal line. He's been working hard on different components of the project, mainly kind of the zoning and OCP work, and we're hoping that Neil can provide a bit of an update now today on the annual report, which was included in my report for council's information, a bit of discussion on kind of next steps and where we hope to be kind of end of year, and answer any questions that council may have regarding the project. So I guess with that, Neil, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Brad, and thanks for allowing me to speak today and introduce the Saskatoon North Partnership for Growth, P4G.
Neil, Neil, can I just break in there for a minute?
Sure.
Do you think when you're speaking, can you put your video on so we can see you?
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
Sorry, Neil, that was my fault.
Yeah, no worries. How's everybody doing? Okay, so just again, just here to report on the annual report from 2019. So P4G has been working quite diligently through the last year on working on the district official community plan, taking the regional plan and turning it into an official community plan. We've also been working on the district zoning bylaw and a planning district agreement. However, also through 2019, some of the achievements, as you've seen in the report, include the Green Network Pilot Project, which collected a significant amount of data on drainage in the north sector of the region, which was very helpful in understanding how drainage works. That information is going to be combined with a natural area screening study that was just completed back in April and reported to the ROC committee back then, the Regional Oversight Committee. And we're hoping to use that information to refine the green network of the area. Some areas it's going to narrow the green network, some areas it might increase the green network. So we're going to have to work on that and figure that out. PAC will be working on that later this year. Other work that was done last year is a lot of discussion regarding the regional water supply. We talked about the water supply to the region and also a discussion of rates. Saskatoon Water and SaskWater are working on a new updated contract. The last contract that they had was from the 1980s. So they're working to update that, and we're hoping that will support the city providing direct connections to the region rather than having to work through SaskWater. And we're hoping that that also results in a reduction in the rates coming out of the city. We also met with the minister last fall and had a very good meeting discussing the issues regarding water supply in the region. And it seemed to be like one of the biggest challenges was communication. And so the minister supported our recommendation that a regional water forum be held this past spring. However, due to circumstances beyond our control, that has been put off for now, but we're hoping to still get to that here sometime in the future, hopefully in the fall. Like I said before, we are this year, insofar as 2020 initiatives are concerned, we're continuing to work on the official community plan and district zoning bylaw. We're very close to completing the district official community plan. We have a ROC meeting at the end of May, which we're hoping to have a final draft to them for support, and then looking at a public engagement plan to go forward in June. Looking forward to getting approval of the planning district by the member municipalities in September, and hopefully implementing it by the end of this year, provided the government can get back to us with the approvals. The other item that we're working on this year is the North Concept Plan, which is the lands in the RM between the city of Saskatoon and Warman and Martensville. Doing a little bit more detailed plan than what is in the official community plan, and laying out some of the land uses a little bit more clearly, articulating them and coming up with a plan there for policies as to how that might be implemented. So that's my update insofar as what's happening. Like I say, a lot of work is being undertaken and we continue to work on it. I'll sort of wrap it up there. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer any. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Neil. Now, questions. Does anyone have any questions for Neil? Well, I guess you did a great job explaining what we're doing now, and we must be doing a great job letting our council know what's happening. So thank you so much, Neil.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you again for allowing me to speak today.
Yeah, keep well.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, moving on to planning. Managers, I guess just when you are talking, if you could put your video on so we can see you. Makes it a little bit easier for us.
Hello, Mayor Spence, members of council. For the most part, my report is mainly for updates, just to kind of what's been going on. I did provide some updated building stats for the month of April. I wouldn't say that it was obviously one of our best months in the last 10 years, but it actually wasn't horrible, I guess, when you look at the numbers comparatively to last year, especially when we look at kind of the single family and renovation type permits. Commercial still obviously down in value, but up in the number of permits. And there's a few larger permits that weren't calculated within this one just because of the timing and when we got the report. I guess if there's any questions regarding the permit numbers, I can discuss those now.
Kendall.
Brad, how many single family dwellings started between April 30th and May 5th?
So we've had 3 that wouldn't be kind of included on this report. Is that what you're looking for?
Well, I looked at the Sask Home Builders report and they say that we have 7 as of the end of April, and you have 9 here. So I'm just wanting to know.
Well, and part of that would be because when we report to Saskatoon Home Builders Association, we only report to the end of May. So they would only have those numbers. So the 3 additional to May 5th would have been additional. And then there's been 3 since that May 5th, I guess. Does that make sense?
Okay. I just wanted to,
yeah, it gets a little
clarify the numbers.
Gets a little confusing with the home builders numbers just because of when we report to them, and sometimes their numbers are a little out of whack in terms of what our numbers are, kind of a little more relevant or timely, I guess I should say.
Is there any other questions?
I guess in addition to the permit numbers, I did provide some updated real estate numbers. We did get some information from a couple of different agents locally, just on kind of sentiment out there and feelings moving forward. We did have 12 sales in April as opposed to 31 in April of 2019. I think their hope is that with interest rates staying low and hopefully kind of some things kind of opening up a little more in the economy, that maybe they'll have that kind of rush they typically get in the spring, maybe a month later. And then obviously provided the update on the Partnership for Growth, which Neil just spoke to. And then the bylaw stats, very busy for bylaw in the month of April. We did not see any slowdown, and if anything, maybe a bit of an increase in the number of calls and animal control type issues that we were dealing with. So it's been a busy month overall.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions of Brad? Richard?
Thank you, Mayor Spence. Just a question for you, Brad. Regarding the bylaw enforcement and certainly, with how busy things are on that front, would it not make sense to hire back our part-time laid off worker?
So yeah, we've started some of those discussions with HR and Bob, and I think that is definitely something that we're looking at doing here shortly. If things kind of stay the same way that they are, there's a few things that we'd like to get to kind of above and beyond the day-to-day calls which we're getting. Back alleys, the back alleys and some of the unsightly property stuff that we typically do in the spring has been kind of put on the back burner a little bit. So those are some different things that we'd like to get to. So yes, we have started those discussions. Actually last week, HR, Bob and I had a bit of a discussion about that. And we are looking at potentially bringing that position back sooner rather than later.
Gary?
Again, thank you for the real estate numbers. I appreciate them. Anything for May yet, like that you've got? Because I'm seeing a lot of houses that have been up for sale for a long time that are now sold. So it's some of those long time last year houses that over a year on the market, I'm seeing sold. The drive home from Co-op, it was amazing. So I'm thinking there's something in the air right now.
Yeah, even actually my next door neighbor's house has been for sale for quite some time and sold last week. Actually, nothing formally for May yet. The real estate agents we did talk to did say that last week of April, they were seeing a big uptake in calls and kind of inquiries. So I'm anticipating that that'll kind of play into what we get in terms of numbers for May. But again, I will definitely provide updated numbers for May once we get into next committee of the whole, or kind of as soon as I can, even if I can provide them in a separate email.
Anyone else? Brian?
Just curious, Brad, the estimated completion of paving 384. Have we heard anything about that recently between here and Martinsville?
I haven't heard kind of a date when the contractor will be back. I did put an inquiry out to Adam with the RM, I believe it was last week, if not the week before, just to see if they had nailed down when the contractor would be back to complete that work. The last I heard, it was supposed to be kind of early spring, so that would be what I'd consider now. But as soon as I do find out some further information for that, I can send it a quick email, just hey, this is kind of when they'll be back, but hopefully soon.
Sure. Thanks.
Brad, I'm just wanting to know, in regards to bylaws, so would they have staggered shifts?
Yes. Historically, when we've had both bylaw officers working before, we did about a half an hour overlap on the 3 kind of days that our part-time bylaw officer would be working, just so that they could trade notes and kind of determine what needed to be done. In the case, just because of the issues with coronavirus and trying to keep social distancing and that type of thing, we're going to be handling that a little differently. So there won't be the half-hour kind of layover. They'll deal with any sort of conversations or work that needs to be done between the 2 of them over the phone. And then Brett would, or the part-time bylaw officer, would be working evenings and weekends. And obviously our full-time bylaw officer would be that kind of Monday to Friday, 8 to 4:30.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Kendall?
Part of your report is the new policies in regards to fees. Can you give me a little background as to how this came about? And I know that it'll be better, but just giving it background for those that are maybe watching on YouTube.
Yeah, so the goal with the fees bylaw is not to necessarily up fees or change any of the fee structures. Currently, right now, we bill out for example, if someone takes out a discretionary use, we don't have a set fee that they pay the city. We basically invoice them for the cost of the advertising. So the intent behind the fees bylaw is basically just to take all of those planning fees right now that we basically invoice out after the fact and put them under a fee, so that when someone comes in to apply, they're paying the fee up front. It saves on logisticals with admin staff and not having to invoice people. And we've had issues in the past where we've had some difficulties collecting after the fact. So basically this will just push the payment up. So when they're actually applying for whatever they might be, discretionary use, subdivision, rezoning, that they're paying for that cost up front before we actually do the work.
Gary?
One more question. I was going to bring it up with Neil, but then I thought it's probably more appropriate for you. A little bit with the regional node, and just have we started any partner talk? Because as we hear about potential infrastructure money out there and different things like that, I mean, there can be regional stuff from a hospital to a swimming pool to RCMP buildings to many, many things. And we identified a regional node within the study, but but I realized that a lot of that next step is talking to our partners, probably Corbin Park and Martinsville, for sure, maybe Osler to be a part of that too. And I'm just wondering, is any of that started? Because I realize it's a bit of a long process, but it might be an opportune time with some of the stuff coming down.
So to be honest, I guess the short answer would be no. We have been, especially Martinsville and us, through the North Concept Plan work and even some of the revisions to the map, there was talk about potentially, did that have to be on the map, that kind of thing. And we really pushed hard for it to be included in those areas. And in the North Concept, where there'll be a little bit of language around, I guess, what could potentially be expected there. I feel like in terms of some of the move forward in that discussion point, administration on both sides, Martinsville, Warman, and DRM, will be looking for some direction from their councils in terms of maybe starting some of that discussion and seeing where it could go. The other thing is I think, you know, whether it's a regional RCMP facility or a future regional high school or swimming pool or whatever it might be, I think once that discussion starts, whether it's for the school or the pool or the RCMP, I think that will be kind of what maybe triggers to, you know, this can happen there. The servicing and stuff will be partially dealt with through the North Concept Plan though. So that will provide some background information in terms of how the site would be serviced and what potentially could go there, which also might help facilitate some of that discussion.
So a lot of it then, just to follow up, a lot of it then would probably be all of us sort of after our next strategic plan, maybe throwing it out there that it's something that how much do we want to chat about this moving forward? So it's sort of probably a next year thing in some ways.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that is difficult for administration to come and tell council, yes, this needs to be there. It has to be something that's maybe pushed a little more on the political side. That being said, you know, we've got the facilities review and there's some information in there that'll come out about the RCMP station and that kind of thing too, which may drive some of our discussions at strategic planning, which in turn, I think you guys could take to that next level, the political level, to discuss further.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Kendall?
Brad, in your report about AECOM's report today, is there a chance, will we get a chance to talk to you and Bob in regards to this without Chris, so that we can just get an update from administration's perspective on this? I personally feel that I finally get some report, and I guess I want an update from the administration of how you feel about that. Because we were kind of left in uncertainty of how much money we had and what we needed and so forth. And I would like to hear from you.
Yeah, and I think from administration's perspective, we were really waiting for this pre-design report to come out. The intent behind it was that Chris knew kind of how much money we had to kind of deal with now and kind of where construction prices are for the time, I guess, the time of year we're in, but also the environment we're in right now with Corona and all of that other stuff, where it gave him the idea that maybe there's some different components that can be included on this expansion that we maybe initially didn't think about because we weren't sure about the kind of funding we would have. From administration's perspective, I don't think there's a ton that we know as of yet. All we've done is basically review the pre-design report. There's obviously some additional work that Chris has put in there regarding potential for a Sager system and just some other components to the project that he thinks we could probably get done for the funding that we have. And that was our intent by bringing Chris in today, was to basically explain that report, explain kind of where we're at now and what next steps will be. But that being said, there's quite a few working parts with it in terms of what components of the project will start when and how we kind of bundle those different components together to ensure that we're kind of getting the best value for dollar when we're going to tender, and what time of year we're tendering it to make sure that there's time frame left within the year to actually do construction during when the weather's good and all that. So basically, we've looked at the project as kind of a 3-year project. Chris figures we probably could potentially get it done in 2 years if everything kind of goes as planned, but we do have that 3rd year as kind of a buffer just in case. And I'd suggest that this pre-design report is a first step of many that we will be discussing with council, and is kind of just, I like I said, kind of just that first step in a much larger process. But, you know, by all means, after the presentation or another time, you know, we could always have a discussion without Chris as part of it, especially if there's, I guess, anything crazy that comes out of the discussion this afternoon.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Okay, City Manager Smith.
Thank you, Worship. I just have one item. There's some information there for council's just general information, but I do have one item, and that's the feasibility of water well in the city limits. And on February 11th, I met with the owner of Rainbow Car Wash, Carlin Enns, regarding his request for permission to drill a water well to use the water for the car wash. Administratively, we've been reviewing the request, weighing the pros and cons of allowing the drilling of a water well within the city for such use. And on February 18th, the item was brought forward to City Council for consideration. As a result of those discussions, at the meeting, Council asked administration to investigate and report back on a few of the items. I'll go through them. One, will the private well have any impact on the toxicity levels in the lagoon? And I spoke with Jason Ford from Water Security Agency, and he advised that it's not anticipated that the operation of the well will have any adverse effect on the city wastewater system. Also, Council would like a report with the monthly sewage cost breakout from the regular utility bill for car wash on Central, and I provided that in a report. It's attached. Also, Council asked for a report on how or if this will impact other car washes in the community by allowing this one to have a private water source. There's a table showing the annual usage of the other car washes in the city. And if we use the water consumption that must exceed 5,000 cubic meters in a year, that's kind of what we established as an amount. No other car wash within the city at the present time would be approved to drill a well, as they would not exceed the 5,000 cubic meters. Question: list of other communities in Saskatchewan that allow wells and how they deal with them. This took actually quite a bit of time. People were slow in responding back to our request for information, but I did provide what we received back. Saskatoon, they do not allow, and then I attached the response from the city of Saskatoon because it was fairly lengthy. Regina didn't respond to our request. Langham, no response, and they can't find it and couldn't find anything online regarding the wells. Lanigan, wells are not allowed. Martinsville, wells are not allowed and will not be in even for industrial purposes. Humboldt, existing wells are allowed to continue but must be metered and inspected if connected to the sewer. New wells are not allowed, and PA, strictly no wells in the service area, would only be considered in an extreme case, and they have never been approached recently. And then Watrous may have existing wells, but they do not allow for any new wells. So as mentioned at the February 18th Committee of the Whole meeting, City Administration provided a recommendation to Council advising that we proceed with providing authorization to Carlin Enns of Rainbow Car Wash to develop a well on the property for the purpose of providing processed water for his car wash operations only as a pilot project. However, we do understand that this proposal is out of the ordinary and would be a significant change in the operations of our water service in the city of Warman. Also, further, we understand that if successful, there may be more pressure from other private businesses to drill wells on their own properties. And as a result, it would be acceptable for Council to deny the request on that item alone. So based on the information from the other communities in not allowing the construction of the well within their municipal corporate limits, it would be easy to change my recommendation to not allow Mr. Enns to establish a well. However, based on the information from the Water Security Agency and Saskatchewan Health Authority, I don't believe I have enough evidence to change the recommendation if Mr. Enns is willing to comply with the regulations that would be imposed upon him from these regulatory bodies. So unless City Council would like further information on the request, I would bring it back to the next regular meeting of Council for consideration and direction. And that's my report on the well.
Okay, Gary, I'm going to ask you to take over. I'm going to go take a call. So if you can lead this conversation. Thanks.
Okay, I guess any questions? Let's start out with that for Manager Smith. Councillor Tooley, and then Councillor.
I do have a couple of questions. I guess not necessarily questions, but more so almost concerns in the sense of the information that we're getting here from, from what we're getting from the city of Saskatoon, and then what we're hearing from other municipalities. It almost seems like going down this path would be a little bit of a step backwards. And so, just even with the information that's provided from the city of Saskatoon, I understand completely that as a business, the car wash is going to be looking for ways to reduce their costs, and this is one viable option that they've identified. However, I'm not sure if I think the concerns, in my estimation, almost outweigh that potential gain.
Okay, any comments there, Manager Smith?
No, I agree. Certainly when you talk to the other municipalities or you get back, the feedback that we got back is that they probably wouldn't allow it to happen, although they're not being approached either on a regular basis. If they were being approached on a regular basis like we are, there may be a different outcome. They couldn't guarantee that. As well, a lot of the other communities like the city of Saskatoon, produce their own water, so there's an advantage there versus purchasing. And again, that's for the operator of the car wash who feels it's extremely expensive to purchase the water from a third party, which we as well know. And he's looking at reducing his costs, although he'll have a significant capital investment to make it happen. But in weighing all those things, it was hard to, I agree, like listening to the other communities, they don't allow, and that's it. And then when you look at what he wants to do and what the regulatory bodies say, that yes, it can be done from a regulatory perspective, but they'd have to adhere to all these rules of which he would have to adhere to. So it's difficult. I totally understand where, as a council member and as myself, looking at it, you're making a big change in the way we do things, but it's a request that's come forward. And when you look at other than just saying no because other communities aren't, it's tough to say when the regulatory bodies are saying yes, but there's a whole bunch of parameters that you have to go through. It was a tough way.
Just a quick follow-up, if allowed.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Tooley.
Thank you, Councillor Philipchuk. Just also wondering if we would also, if we do move down the path and if we do approve this, will there be something written to the contract that will prohibit maybe the sale of the water for other purposes other than just the car wash? I'm thinking sort of anything, any bulk sales of water or anything like filling water bottles, those kind of things.
Yes, so there'd be quite a few regulations within. Most of that would be, again, from the regulatory bodies from health mostly. They couldn't sell anything, any production water, like any potable water. It would all have to be for industrial use for the car wash, and it would be car wash only. One thing that I put in the report is that it's not something that we want to have a bunch of little utilities around where somebody has the well, puts up a standpipe or whatever and starts selling water in bulk like we have, for, let's say, farmers spraying or something like that. I don't know what to use for, but no, it would have to be for his own use as a car wash.
Okay, thank you. That's it, Councillor Tooley. Okay, Councillor Beck and then Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Bob, so I have a question, and then I guess with this year, I guess some comments afterwards. So with reading the information provided by Brent Latimer, he did have 6 questions outlined in his report there. Have those questions been put through to the applicant?
Yes, the whole string of emails, even from Water Security Agency right through Mr. Enns has received it all.
Okay, yeah, certainly good to know there. One of the other things that I did notice, that I did note there is, Saskatoon indicates that, that they feel that they should actually have a formal policy basically put in place. So probably similar to Councillor Tooley's comment there, where it does feel like it is like a little bit in terms of going backwards, because it's one of those, let's say one of those things that's not really promoted here in the province. Obviously kind of creates a bit of a tension here, because it's something that's not traditionally done. At the same time, well, this year we I can certainly appreciate that the that the applicant here certainly has some significant water costs that probably doesn't need to use potable water for his operation. So I'd like to give a little bit of weight to that aspect of things. So bridging both of those together, is it possible, because like there again, like I'm really not a fan of the whole one-off or pilot project, and that kind of thing. Could we not, as a city, basically develop a policy where the let's say for car washes, where they could pursue the let's say permanently like the well, to actually control their costs, and basically outline all of the protocols that we need to have in place, where it couldn't be let's say sold or let's say like the off sale, and then we can certainly make that subject to metering and inspections and a special business license that must be renewed for the lifetime of that water service.
All good comments. I think that's why we were looking at a pilot project. This is a pilot project from an administrative perspective anyway, is that you can then review it. You haven't opened it wide open by if you established a policy and said, these are the 3 things you have to meet. And then you open it up to lots of car washes or maybe even other industries that look at it and say, okay, I can meet those 3 or 4 or whatever requirements you put forward. There might be other things, you might be too far down the road before you can put it back into the bottle. So the thing about a pilot project is that it's a pilot project until it's proven out, until it works, until there's, I'm sure we're going to have other policies that we would look at implementing if we ever did open it up. That's why my recommendation is that if you do it, I would do it as a pilot project. And of course, it's entirely up to council, but that way you can monitor it, assess it, see what it's like before you start opening it up into a policy to allow everybody. But again, that's just my thoughts. When you have a new concept come out, it's usually on a pilot project basis, so you can kind of figure those things out, see if it's going to work before you open it up to the whole.
Okay, so just on that point then, is this a pilot project then that we could do just for car washes only? And they're again, not just limited to this one, let's say operator, because I guess that's the part that feels a little bit unfair in terms of, this year he's pursuing it. Obviously he's, certainly with the, with the water usage and whatnot, he is certainly one of the most active here in our community, but there again, he's not the only one in that particular industry. I'd hate to give advantage to one that's not available to to another. So with this year, I would like to have that level playing field, for the car wash industry, not just that one operator.
And that's entirely up to council. I think there'd have to be a lot of policy discussion. I think if you're going to open it up to more, because I think, you know, can you do it on your existing property? Is it going to be just, again, do you want every car wash or only those that are significant amounts of using significant amounts of water? So I look at it, it's a car wash. It could be, you know, it could be any type of industry that's using a large amount of water would maybe make more sense to me than just a car wash. But again, I can see from a competitive perspective, he's looking for some way to control his costs, maybe pass it on to the public. I don't know, or maybe make more money. But I agree with what you're saying. I guess I just wouldn't want to open it up too far until we know what this might look like first. But again, I appreciate all your comments, same things that we've thought about. How do we open it up? There's lots of other industries that are using more water than the car wash. Some of the car washes there, as you can see from the information, there's a significant difference in a car wash usage from one car wash to the other. So we looked at it from more of a, you could look at it two things, car wash and 5,000 cubic meters. I don't think there's going to be anybody that would reach that, but I also don't think that there'd be a bunch of investment in capital if they were using less water. But it could potentially create a difference in pricing of water if he invests in that capital and the well and everything, and is getting his water for X amount of dollars, and we're charging you know, our price that we have to get for the water.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Jones.
You know, I kind of think along the lines, you know, Councillor Tooley, and just when I read all the information, what I kept wondering was, you know, like, you know, and I know you can, you know, you can always engineer ways around stuff, but I just felt like, you know, was the risk to our own community's water quality, you know, that was referenced, really worth this one-off opportunity for one business to do this, when it didn't even, quite honestly, when you dug into it, I don't know whether there's a real benefit there or not. And that's certainly for them, you know, for them to determine on their own whether or not this is a benefit. I get that. You know, to us, I guess it's, do we want to potentially put at risk the water supply, you know, of the community of Warman? And I get 100% that it'll be 50 people telling you one way you won't, or 50 that will. But for one business, it does just feel like it's something. It just doesn't feel right to me to open it up, even on a trial basis to me. The other one is, I just, you know, we're kind of in an era, and we do a lot of other things where we're trying to conserve water, and we're trying to put incentives in place for people who use less water. And this certainly would go against that. And the more that other types of incentives come that are there to conserve water, that the gap between this opportunity, this person having their own well, and the rest of the community that doesn't have that option, it just widens. And I recognize that there's a bit of an incentive through our sewage recovery, but you know, the primary cost is through the delivery of the water. So you know, for me anyways, at a real general level, it just doesn't feel, when I look across the community, like it's like the risk is worth it for the community. So that's all I have on it.
Okay. Councillor Peterson, then Councillor Schramm.
My thoughts are pretty much echoing, you know, Councillor Tooley and Councillor Jones, you know, as well. I'm just not sure the benefits outweigh the risks, and I'd be more inclined to encourage and support, you know, if you were looking at doing some sort of water recovery system to reuse, you know, water that goes down as drains, and try and find a way to conserve and reuse the water, as opposed to digging a separate well, and then you have to, you know, there's going to be expenses with enforcement and monitoring, and and stuff like that. I just think that the risk is just not worth the benefit.
Okay, Councillor Schramm.
Yeah, Bob, my concern with our City Manager Smith, I should really use your official title. Why, I guess in regards to what Saskatoon and the other communities have said, I guess for some it's a step backwards, but for me it's kind of a question as to why administration feels that this is beneficial. Do we not have enough water? Is the amount of water that this car wash is using causes concern in how much we have in our new reservoir and how much is being used? I just feel like we're taking the step out of the norm of everywhere else, and I'm just wondering why administration feels this is a good thing.
I can't say administration saying it's a good thing. As I'd said in my report, that it was a request from a business owner within the community that had an idea and felt like this is something that he would like to do. Our obligation from administration, I believe, is to investigate that and find out what are the pros and cons. And the only there's a lot of I guess there's just a lot of information out there in regards to, we don't, because one, it's never been requested, or as some of the council members, we're just uncomfortable with that, and it might start something bigger. So we're not going ahead with it. And I took that very seriously when I did the recommendation, and the recommendation isn't support. It's just that you can't, based on that information of really anecdotal of some, no, we would never allow them to, the information that Saskatoon provided, which actually got us to having the discussion with health and water security agency, and both those regulatory bodies felt it was able to be done. And of course, health saying, yes, you can do it, but you'd have to take all these risks out of it. And for sure, you wouldn't be able to do it unless you had a totally separate system and all the other things coming from, well, it wouldn't be able to get into our potable water. But those are things that they said would have to be. So when you look at what a business owner in the community has requested, and then looking at what the other communities have said, just that they don't really, they wouldn't look at it. And it is something that is different, whether it's a step backward or a step forward. It would be a step backward maybe from what some council members and others would say. And then, but from the business, from a businessman, it would be a step forward. So taking all those things into consideration, I just couldn't say that, other than know from the other communities, there is a way to do it, I guess, according to the Water Security Agency and health. So I
guess my question comes from the comment that this is a heavy user, and that it does have some merit because of the water consumption is excess of so many cubic meters. And so I'm just wanting clarification as to how the administration feels.
Sorry, getting back to your question of does the impact on our water, water supply and the new reservoir and so on, what impact does that have? We didn't really take that into consideration. It's about 2 days worth of water in a year that we use. So if that gives you any kind of perspective, the amount of water, what he consumes in a year would be about 2 days of what we consume in a year.
Okay. From the materials from the Saskatchewan Water Authority, he was saying that the operator of the car wash would have to have 2 systems, right? Because he still has to offer a potable water solution and this. That is still correct?
Yes.
Okay. And
they have to be separate.
They have to be separate. Okay, so and then the liability issue, these things will all be in this agreement? Because they did say about liability issues would be on the car wash owner, correct?
Yes, and that's even with the discussion with the Water Security Agency. So if there's any issues that they have, I think every 5 years they provide a certificate to operate the well. And if there's any issues with the operator or with the well, or the amount of water that the well's producing, or what it might be doing to an aquifer below, that's entirely up to them to, if they pull the license to operate the well, that's what they do. Health looks at it from a health perspective.
Okay, a couple of other questions. In that thing that from the water agency talks about drilling, straight down or diagonal, are we saying yes to whatever that is in order for him to hit aquifer? And then also the decommissioning part, is that also something that has to be involved in this pilot project and put that forward?
That's entirely up to them and the Water Security Agency. So right now, what he's looking for is just the approval to test a well, but there's no sense testing a well if we're going to say no in the future. So what the Water Security Agency will be asking them to do is drill a well, and they have to test it. They pull out so much water or whatever. They look at the effects of the water in that aquifer, whichever aquifer they hit. I believe it's just straight down. Otherwise, I think it'd be too costly for directional, but I don't know that.
But in the concept, it says that the community is responsible to give them direction on how they're drilling. So whether it's diagonal or straight down, we have to give direction to that. Is that not correct?
No, we just give approval to the Water Security Agency. We give approval to allow a well within our municipal boundaries, and then they take care of the rest. Water Security Agency. We don't have anything to do with how we would make sure it was on their property. We would ask them for a location. That would probably be more from a planning perspective of, you have to be on your own property. I don't know if there's any regulations within how far from a building or things like that, but the drilling of the well would be totally up to the owner and the Water Security Agency. The hooking up and the utilization of it would be up to the health region to regulate that through their dealing with potable water and with plumbing regulations that would be required.
Okay.
Any other questions? I actually have a couple points I want to mention with this. First of all, I appreciate the ingenuity, and because it's just like us going to a SUMA conference or an FCM conference. I'm sure he saw this and said, what are the possibilities? So it's the excitement from a young entrepreneur that you say, this is something that maybe potentially could be revolutionary for him and for others. I'm not against it. I look at, I need the security in place though, or I need to see insurance that would say you have all the liability if something happens, that you take on all of this. So the insurance would be a big part to me, but I'm not totally against the idea, because any water that is less that comes out of our system that isn't needed that way is less that we maybe have to have in the future. Because maybe we don't need the water right now, maybe it's not pressured right now, but we just spent a lot of money on a reservoir, and at some point that won't be big enough. We'll need another one, and we'll need another one. And as we continue to grow, this might be that next idea. So I sort of, where Councillor Beck is, there's some things in place that, the one thing that comes to mind is if you allow it, I would probably be the next person in line, not me, but somebody would be the next person in line to say, I'm gonna build a car wash out a little bit so I can build this type of setup to be able to take advantage of this situation. So it might be a Warman thing, or it might be a Corman Park thing, but it might be something that ends up being something that ends up using this type of concept. So in some ways, I think it's the thresholds that you mentioned, I think are important to say, but it's from the financial sense too. You wouldn't be building something that costs you so much capital if you're not using the water. So there's a number and a number where it makes sense. In some ways, I almost equate it to solar panels. Like it's just a different way of doing things. Not everybody's doing it in Warman, but it works for some. And it might be a better mousetrap for some people because they're looking at things, but some are taking the risk up front with that and not. But I have to have that zero liability to the city of Warman insurance policy. So if that isn't doable, then I'm not in. But if it's doable where insurance will take this on to say if something happened to our water supply in any way, their insurance picks it up, I'm okay with it. That's my comment.
Looks like you guys had a real hearty conversation. So is there any other further comments? Okay, well, I guess we'll move on. We'll move on to, I'm sorry.
Councillor, Mayor Spence, it might almost be important to hear your side a little bit because it almost seems like a split 3-3 right now with moving forward or just stopping at this point. And so that was just what I got by the conversation. Obviously, we haven't voted to anything, but and I think just to give Manager Smith a little bit of direction with this, if he brings it forward on Monday, just hearing that, is this something we pursue or is this something that now we're off the table with? That just so he has some direction. That's what I read out of our round circle because everybody commented on this actually.
Okay, well, I think for myself, I agree. I think to have a young entrepreneur that has researched and done a lot of work to look at some really interesting ingenuity is you don't want to squash that. However, I too am concerned about a couple things. And the one thing from the research that was presented to us was the fact that nobody else is doing this, no one else will allow it. That sent a real big red flag up for me. It was like, okay, well, I don't know if other communities out there have had any sort of recent inquiries about things like this, but it looks to me like it's not something that's very popular. So for us to be taking a step towards something that is almost shut down around the province, that would concern me. I too would want to make sure that there is mechanisms in place that protect us if something should go sideways with the water. I'm always concerned about setting the precedent. If we set a precedent for one, that means we better be willing and able and ready to support anyone else that comes to our table. Whether this is a pilot or not, it'll come to a point where you do have others that are coming and wanting the same plan, and we can't say no to anyone else. So those are kind of my thoughts. I really think that just because they're not doing it anywhere else doesn't mean that it's not maybe something that can be looked at, but it does send up a red flag. So I don't know where that falls into the conversation that was heard before me, but it is one of those things that is new and different to the practices that we have been doing, and also other cities and communities around our province. So we are putting ourselves out there by supporting it. Does that help with the conversation?
Just, you almost summarized some of the different comments that were there. So I guess Councillor Smith, just to sort of sum it up, it would be, you end up probably bringing it to us and we make a decision on Monday whether to move forward or not. So I guess it's a motion comes to the table and then we have a vote, because in some ways what I'm hearing, and I've just put in the summary because I heard all the conversations, that it might be something we're not ready for today, but it might be something we're ready for when there's a little bit more out there besides us being out there, just with some of the other things that come into play, because it is a provincial oversight, or provincial overseen anyway. So, but how does that impact when it finally something happens to us? So that would be my suggestion.
Are we going to be getting any further follow-up in information? I don't know if that was requested. Like, I'm thinking about around the insurance part of it. Is there anything that will be forthcoming?
We can certainly look into that. I'll contact the proponent as soon as I can, and and see what his, if he can reach out to his insurance company to see if he would be insured to hold us. So we're not liable in any event. I don't know how that would work. Maybe a, you know, additional named insured on his insurance. There might be some other avenues to look at that as well. If that's going to make council comfortable with at least that end of it, from the insurance end of it.
And one other question, do we happen to know if any of these other communities have had anyone in the last, let's say, 5 years come to them with a proposal like this?
I don't believe so. I think it's just been, you know, like I said, the city of Saskatoon, when you look at theirs, I think they're pretty normal of what's happened. Nobody's come forth with anything in very many years because they've been using their, you know, they're probably happy to have access to that water. Where you might see it is maybe in the RM, there's probably more regarding that, where you know, people take their industry outside of a you know, a city or whatever into a lot where they can have a larger tract of land to use more, such as processing, I think would be one that would come to mind. But I should maybe, Brad did some of this work research as well. Brad, do you have any other comments on the information you gathered from the other communities?
No, we didn't ask the question about if they've been approached in recent times, I guess, about this. We did hear that from time to time, I guess it does get brought up in Saskatoon, but they're a hard no. And I think one of the main reasons is because they own the utility and sell the water. But it wasn't one of the questions that we focused on in our analysis, no.
An interesting one was Humboldt, where they allow the existing but no new wells. And so that's a little bit of a flag for me. That was one of those ones that if it's happening there and they're okay with it, but they're not allowing new ones, that was a little bit of a why not? But
Kendall?
Well, listen, anyway, heed or impede those lands that have been annexed by the city and are still on their own water. And by going in this direction, gives them case in point of keeping their own system operating. I'm thinking of the two properties, the one that's just on Central, that acreage there, and the one down on Central, on Centennial and Central. They're both, I think, are still on their own water and sewage. Is that correct, Brad?
I was under the understanding that I thought one was on city water. Jason, actually, sorry to jump around here, but Jason might know better with that.
Good afternoon. I'm not aware. There was a gentleman off of Third that was still off of, he didn't have city water, but that's been since developed. So I'm not aware of any other properties that are on well water.
Yeah, I was pretty sure that after that well on Third got decommissioned, that that was the last one in the city.
I think so.
So are you suggesting that has a well that's operational, or that's on, when you say on well water, using it for their potable water or in their house?
What I was under the impression in our last annex, there was the property on Centennial, the acreage that's there, that they were grandfathered to keep their own system till the land was sold or they moved. And so I was just curious as to, is that property or other properties that have been annexed in the past 10 years, are they still on their own, or they've been put into the city?
Okay, you're talking across from the co-op?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, we are not providing him with water.
Okay, that was my concern, is does that set a precedent for him to keep his water? and to not, you know, allow him to say, well, you're doing it over there, so I can keep it here.
Good point.
Does
Okay, that's a really good point you raised there, because again, we're talking about setting precedents. The difference, I guess, would be one is a business and one is a home, but I don't know if that changes the precedent. That would be another conversation, I would think.
Yeah, and I guess it'd change the policy, because if it was denied, then would you then say that nobody can operate a well within their city? There could be 10 or 15 out there of wells that are being used for irrigation purposes. You know, old wells that were, because at one time, it wasn't very long ago, the city actually didn't have water. I think it was in the 70s or 970, I think, when water came in here. Brad, you might have, or Jason might have a better idea, but I heard it was pretty, when we were talking about the lead line thing, that's where I remember that there was discussion about it. Water didn't actually come out here until, like, compared to other communities, sorry. But again, we're on a different, so I think that if, you know, if council did say that, you know, wells are not, we're not going to allow wells, then I think you'd probably put that moratorium in place in policy, that we're not going this way in the future, and how you're going to deal with grandfathered ones would have to be in that policy.
Okay, so do we have all the information that we need to come to council on next Monday and make a decision on this, council, or do we want to see anything further? Bob?
So if I could, your worship, I will reach out to Mr. Enns, see what we can find out from an insurance perspective. If I can't get anything, let's say concrete, or can't get a hold of him or whatever, I will just, I'll move the item to another council meeting, although I know he's anxious to get going, but without that, but I think it's important, from what I heard from the conversation from council, is it's important to have that surety or security there. So I guess I could say to him, without that, it's going to be problematic. And so I would need that to even bring it forward again.
Okay.
I just want to put a caution, so that if everybody's expecting it to be at the next meeting, it will be, if I can get some either yes or no from him on the insurance perspective. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move down to finance manager. Amanda, you're on mute still.
There we go. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The first item I have in my report today is the quarterly financial update. So this is for Q1, which is the period between January 1st and March 31st of 2020. Just as a high level update here of the quarterly financial update, the revenues recognized to date are at 12% of budget, mostly because general government is not, the tax levy is not levied until June and is recorded on the Q2 report, and expenses recognized to date are at 15% of the budget. In review of the reports and given consideration for the seasonal items, administration does note that all department budgets remain on budget with expectations for this time of year. At the end of Q1 reporting, we do not see any financial effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll expect to see a financial reflection within the Q2 budget. And so the recommendation is that the March 31st, 2020 quarterly financial report be adopted at the next regular meeting of council.
Okay, do we have any questions? And I can't see the participants with the information up. So. Okay, Councillor Schramm?
Just because of the situation we find ourselves currently in, Amanda, would it be hard to add another column to your report as to the up to date in the year? Because the budget, I think, is the budget amount for the whole year, correct?
It is, yeah.
And then in some other report you've given how much has been used, I think in one of the appendices. But I guess in this particular sense of what we're in, I'm kind of curious as to know whether what's been used, whatever percentage that is normal for this type of year. And I can't, I guess I would know more if I had an amount of the budget that's supposed to be used by this time of the year. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Yeah, so for just on average, we would say that at the end of Q1, 25% of the budget should be used. Having said that, then within each budget, there are different considerations, right? Like recreation and culture, for example, is so seasonal that we see some fluctuations there. General government revenue, because of that tax levy not being, that's the most revenue that we see in general government is the tax levy, the biggest percentage, and that doesn't happen until Q2. So we don't see that 25%. In general government there. But aside from some of those things that kind of throw it out of balance, we do expect to see 25% at the end of Q1.
So is it possible to have that in a chart form so that you can see just kind of where we're at? I think that's what you're asking for, right, Kendall?
Yeah, I kind of want to know what the norm has been so that I can understand what this season that we're in is, what effect it's had, and if I need to look at things differently. And I appreciate all the things that you do, Amanda. There's no criticism. I'm just, because of where we're at currently and the situation we find ourselves in, I want to make sure I can look at this report and make adjustments in my head from where we currently are, what we're supposed to be, and understand some of the dynamics of the differences.
Sure. So you'd just like to see another column that shows where we were at the end of Q1 in 2019?
Yes, please.
Yeah, you bet.
Or 20, like the 2020, like we're doing this first quarter of 2020. So what are we supposed to have used, or what revenue is supposed to come in? What expenses should have come in or we've used in regards to the budget, so that I can understand, is this normal or is this non-normal? Maybe 2019 is needed there too. I don't know. I'm not a finance guy. Maybe Gary can help me out with the the particulars.
Gary,
I think from what you're asking, that prior year comparison might be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think he's also kind of wanting to know just what has been used and to see if it's on par, maybe. Is that right, Kendall? Yeah. Okay, Gary, do you have a question, something to add?
I'm gonna take a little bit of Kevin's line from before too, asking about what are the potential savings too? Like what are, from the budgets that we looked at back in November, December, and knowing that the world is completely different right now. So a few things that we're almost looking at, just probably not even one line, it's almost looking at what are the potential savings because of the services that have changed? What are the potential overages? Because the other side of things, what are our new costs that are going to come to our budget in some form or another? And then what are the services, I guess, that we haven't been doing, like a backyard pickup or our recreation facilities. But I guess that all works together. So what are the savings of all those things? But what are the overages for doing those things along the way too? And so that's pretty complex, but when we're talking tax policy, that's fairly important because the information we had in December is a lot different than what we have in May. And so, and not your fault at all. Like it's our new situation we're in, but that as leaders in the community, we have to sort of say, read and react. And it's hard to read and react until we sort of know the bottom line is the bottom line, and then we can make decisions based on that. So it's not to get more. It's a reality check though too, I guess, and saying and some of it's going to be projected again, just like if we start saying different things are not going to happen, we can project that they may not happen in September. And again, that's all a budget is at the end of the day, is a projection anyway. It's, you want it to stay in that lines, but the reality comes into play. So I know that's fairly complex, but I guess it really does come down, what are the potential savings? What are the potential overages from what we know today and can project into the future? of this year.
Sure.
Anything else there, Kevin?
Yeah, just to kind of echo Councillor Philipchuk a little bit, but one of the things I think that I'm interested to know and that I'm interested in looking into is, do we have some potential to, the rate increase that we talked about this year, or the property tax increase that we talked about being the 2.9%? Do we have some room that we can look at lessening that for our community? I think that's ultimately the question that I'm going to have around where we're sitting with the budget right now.
Brian? Oh, I guess maybe you probably want to answer first. Amanda, do you want to step at that?
Yeah, like of course there's a potential there. There's lots of different options that we can look at, right? Depending on what it is council is wanting to do, because there's continued things that we have been doing that we could continue to do too, right? Like such as the changes in services, continuing on with layoffs, such things like that.
Okay. Brian?
Yeah, it's along the same lines. What operating costs and what capital could be deferred that would allow us, or at least a list of options that would allow us to look at that mill rate or the actual tax increase, and whether or not we actually have to go up 2.9% or if it could be lessened.
Well, we are going to be having that conversation here right away, so and that'll probably be a pretty hearty conversation. So, Amanda, do you want to move on to number 2?
Sure. The next item I have is the quarterly capital project. And this is just an update of the capital projects that were budgeted for 2020, as well as an update on some of the items that had carried forward from 2019. There's nothing, that wasn't expected within this report. And so the recommendation is that this project budget update be adopted at the next regular meeting of council.
Okay. Do we have any questions about that? Kevin, are you putting your hand up?
No, I was just adjusting my my phone because I got turned around.
Okay, I'm not seeing any. So
if I could just, because this kind of goes along with the other conversation you were having more regarding the tax policy. So are we, is the intent, like council's looking at going to a 0 rather than 2.9 or something less than the 2.9 of what we, so I guess there's going to be an expenditure as a result of COVID, and we want to do better than that. We want to actually even reduce any increase to pass on to the taxpayers because of the COVID. Is that
well,
I'm just wondering.
Well, Bob, I think when we move into 3, we'll be having quite a conversation around that.
Okay.
And that's next. So are we maybe ready just to move into that right now?
Sure. So item 3 is the mill rate bylaw. And this recommendation is based upon the 2020 budget, which did include a 2.9% increase in property taxes to balance that budget. So you can see laid out there what that means for the base tax as well as the change in the mill rate. You can also see using some sample assessed values within the city of Warman, using the lowest assessed property, mid and highest for both residential and commercial, what that proposed bylaw increase means for both of those situations or all of those situations.
Okay, thank you. So I think what we're going to do is we want to have a conversation around this. So I need to see the screen again, though, for hands. Who wants to start that conversation? Kevin?
I guess I already started it a little bit with my prior comments, but the I guess the thoughts on my mind is, given current circumstances, knowing that we've got a lot of members of our community that facing some hardships that they wouldn't necessarily have faced in previous years, and given that several other communities are revisiting where they are with their budgets for the year, I think it is prudent that at least we look at that as an option. And weigh it. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to go that direction. But I do think we need to at least have a very full conversation about that. and look at that as being a potential option if it is available. And that's my perspective.
Okay. Trevor?
I think, as you know, I've kind of thought like what Kevin was saying, but the more I thought about it, the more I'm thinking of is we've passed a budget. We should pass a mill rate that goes along with that budget, but we should develop a policy so that if we have residents that come to us and say, you know, here's my financial situation from COVID, and right now I'm having trouble with property taxes, that we should have a policy in place to find a way to defer for them so that they can, when this all is done, kind of resume paying and catch up on what's been deferred without penalty. I think that is more prudent than trying to revisit the whole budget and mill rate that goes along with that, as we've already passed. I think if this continues on into the new year, we'll have the opportunity to address, how we're going to approach that at that point. But I'd be more comfortable with continuing with what we've planned and have a policy in place to deal with the few people here and there that might need to have some help.
Okay, Gary?
I'm probably a little bit different with this than Councillor Peterson. I agree, but I just look at all the different things that were a part of the budget that no longer are happening. And so I would like to take a look at it, and sort of as a target is to cut it in half, in the sense that with what we have, that's my thinking. Again, I don't know what other councillors are thinking with that, but more of a 1.5% type of look, and look at the potential savings that we have, that I know Councillor Tooley's mentioned in other times too, that like, what are the things out there that are potential savings that we could have because of the situation we're in, realizing that that's a number that, we do have costs, and there's going to be costs that go with all of this, but I think it would be something that I could work with more so in my mind, and instead of closer to a 3%, because some of the things that we were going to provide are no longer provided within that budget.
Okay. Anyone, or Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I support the direction of a relooking. I know we passed the budget pre-COVID, and, I know a lot of work, and I know that, we don't spend money as administration or council frivolously to begin with. I think that's a great process that's in place already, but I do think we're in a different time, and I think we owe it to everybody, because every business is going through the same thing, and really looking at their costs and making sure that every expenditure, needs to be spent. And I just feel it is a different time, and we have to relook at our operating and even our capital costs. Either we can reduce, take them out, or defer them for a year or two, or even just eliminate them if we have to. I think it's a time that we have to look. I hear you, Trevor. I just don't think that delaying, other people's ability to pay is really, that doesn't save the city money in the longer term. I'd rather see that we had a good look at both our op and our capital costs. That's it for me.
Richard?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Spence. Yeah, this year I certainly support the term that's being thrown around here about the prudent review. I think that would be responsible of us for to go ahead and do. One of the things that I did notice from the actual bylaw, in terms of reading it, is it does not actually specifically say when our property taxes, remittance, and penalties, certainly do come out. Is that noted somewhere else? And if so, with this here, could one of the other expressions of deliberations be when that tax becomes payable? Like, can we defer that to December 31st, perhaps, or before penalties come in? Can we waive penalties completely? So there again, I would like to have that as part of the conversation also.
Okay. Kendall?
I too believe that we need to revisit or have a review. I think it's only due diligence on our part due to the situation we're in. I think that having people come with their problems or their difficulty to pay puts our staff in a very difficult position because they are not qualified to look at someone else's finances and make adjudication whether they can or cannot pay. That puts them in a very and we live in a very private world where financial situations are not wanting to be discussed with staff at the city hall. That would get into a whole place where our staff is not qualified to be. So to me, it's only due diligence to review this, look at it, and I think that some of what Gary has said, or Councillor Philipchuk has said about the splitting it in half, at least having that conversation and knowing what those things are, because there are so much organic or things that are in flux that we need to look at.
Okay, so we've had, it sounds to me like there's an overwhelming majority to split it in half. Oh, one more comment still, Kevin?
Sorry, just now that I've sort of heard from everybody, I wanted to sort of finish off my initial thought and my initial, I guess, reason for sparking the discussion. One of the things that I don't think I want to put our staff into a position to do, and us as council, I guess, too, is, I guess, potentially pick winners and losers when it comes down to giving some relief to people, or not necessarily relief, but just coming up with arrangements for people if they have to present a case. I think that in some respects, I just don't like that approach in the sense of, I want to be respectful of people and not have to have people resort to coming in and basically groveling and giving their rationale for why they think they should have a break. So I think if we're going to look at something, I think we need to look at it as a blanket.
Okay, so now that we've had the conversation and we're looking at slicing it, how would we go forward with this, Amanda, and also to you, Bob?
I think we have a few different options. We do have some reserve accounts that money could be taken out of, such as like the aquatic center reserve. We have $300,000 in there. We can go back and look at the operating budgets, have each manager go back and see if there is any tightening up that can be done in the operating budgets, or like was mentioned, we can look at capital items as well. So there are a few options.
Okay, so would that be done this week with that information coming to us? Because when does this have to be done by?
Dawn likes the reports in by 9 o'clock Thursday morning, so she can give me a little leeway.
Okay. Well,
sorry. Do we want to schedule like a budget meeting to review the budget changes?
That might be a good idea. Yeah, I'm thinking that's probably a very good idea. Bob, do you want to weigh in here? Did we lose Bob?
I'm not, sorry about that. I don't know if it would take a whole budget meeting, but that's certainly up to council. I think that what I'll say we, Amanda, can put together relatively quickly is some options. It all depends on how in-depth council wishes to go with the options. I mean, it's pretty, as I'd mentioned to council members on different occasions, that we can just take, we can take a capital item and just, there it is. At that, now our budget's balanced. We took that capital item out, but it's going to have to be bought at some point in time. We just we struggled, as council did back in December, to try to tighten the budget up as much as we could. So I think Amanda has mentioned that, and we've had this discussion, Amanda and myself, about there's pretty, in operations, we look at reducing some services, whether that's back lane, maintenance and things like that, and reduce staff. That's one way to do it. The other way is capital, and another way is out of reserves. But again, those are items. The reserve money is people in the past have actually built that up, and now you're spending it to reduce your operations. But if that's what council would like to see, we're certainly we can provide those options.
Okay.
For council, I guess I'm hearing that you want to get to a 0 or something less than the 2.9. Really, is what I'm hearing.
Well, we're not. I don't think any of us are saying that we want to get to a 0. I think we're saying if we can reduce what we had thought of to half, we would support that. Okay. I, for one, wouldn't like to see it come out of reserves. I think that those reserves are there for a reason. I would prefer to go back to your capital. I just think that in your capital, there's probably places there where we could wait. We could wait a year. We could. Even in our families, in our households, we're all having to tighten our belts and having to say no to things that we may have done or wanted. I don't see this to be any different than in our city. So I would suggest it be somewhere in capital. But that is where, if we had, I guess, some sort of meeting to talk about this in more depth. I don't know if this, because we do have quite a full agenda here. So I don't think we can do that here. So I guess I would like to hear from council. Would you like just to get the options from administration and then forward it to us to review? Or do we want to have a conversation about this later in the week? It would probably have to be well, we're on Tuesday already, so that's probably Wednesday or Thursday. Someone want to weigh in? Gary?
I know we've had our COVID updates on Fridays at the very beginning, and maybe it's a chance to look at impacts of those types of things too, and then maybe have that discussion at a Friday at 3 o'clock type of meeting again. I know that makes it sometimes tough to get things for Amanda for the next day, but but we're really looking at, here are the recommendations so we can discuss them in detail and then make a proposal moving forward at Monday's council meeting if that's needed.
I think Friday probably would be almost too late. I think you'd have to probably go for Thursday, but Amanda,
unless
doing the work.
Yeah, unless there could be an amendment to the agenda with the mill rate bylaw after the meeting, then Friday would work. But
would we be able to meet Thursday afternoon? If you're able to, or Thursday morning, can you put your hands up? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4.
For me, I could certainly do Thursday afternoon. Thursday morning is going to be tight for me.
Okay, so Thursday afternoon, put your hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And Trevor, you're unable? Okay. So Trevor, you could weigh in with the information that's given to you? Okay. Well, then can we plan for that, Amanda, then to have a meeting scheduled for Thursday afternoon with the information that you're going to bring to us, and then at least you'll have enough time to get it onto the agenda.
Sure. Yes. Okay.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Okay, the next item I have, is it okay to move on?
Yes.
Okay, the next item I have is the reserve transfer. So this is based on the 2019 budget. Administration is recommending the following reserve transfers effective December 31st, 2019.
Okay, is there any questions about any of those? I suppose we'll probably be talking a little bit more about those on Thursday if those recommendations come to us, so. Okay.
The next items I covered for informational purposes, the green cart and compost depot, the uptake in both of those, how busy both of them have been, as well as the utility e-billing and property tax updates.
Well, that's good. So can I ask a question? So for the compost depot area that we have and the green cart, I mean, one is a personal use. We still see quite a large usage of the compost depot though, right?
We do, yes.
Will that subside a bit as people have already got their yard work done?
We expect it will, yes.
Okay.
It's usually quite busy. It was busier than normal this year, but it is usually quite busy when it first opens up and then starts to become less used as the time goes on.
Let's see. Okay, does anyone have any questions about 5? Okay, we'll move on to 6.
Utility building and property tax updates. So basically, we're still just seeing that same $12,000 decrease that we saw a few months ago in the TIPS cash flow. And other than that, it has stayed fairly stable. And as far as the PAP goes, we've had actually more people sign up than we have had requests for removals.
Oh, that's good. Any questions? Okay, thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Okay, so City Clerk, Dawn, what do you have for us?
Oh, I just gotta get my camera going here. Oh, hello. So my report, find it here. It's basically informational purposes with the one request from the city photographer would like to use a drone to kind of go over city facilities, our parks, our playgrounds, and take pictures to use for the city website or videos and stuff. So that was, I guess, the biggest of all of them for me. That needs council's input.
Well, I don't know. We should probably talk about that one. I don't know. Is there any rules or laws about that? Like he says that there's not, but Richard?
Yeah, certainly on that front, we certainly have heard from, from us, Austin, let's say in terms of like the rules regarding that. I know it has to be under a particular weight, otherwise, let's say training or a course is required. And I think with the airport, we're under a restriction for most of our community on that. So I think that there are a few compliance things that we do need to check off, and I don't think we could just, say, yes, you're good. So I think a little bit more investigation would have to be done on that part.
Okay. Anybody else? I agree. Gary?
I was just going to say, I'd like to hear from Russ on some of this, because I know he did a lot of work with this area. So but it really does come down to compliance along the same ways that everything needs to be followed.
Okay, Russ?
Yeah, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Just briefly on it, I know Councillor Beck and I have had some conversations on this with some inquiries that he had separately. Depends on if the business, of course, the drone has to be registered, and then it depends on the license that the drone operator has, assuming that that it's not a micro drone or a drone that's so small that it doesn't have to be regulated by Transport Canada. If it is a regulatable drone or UAV, there are quite a few rules as far as how close to buildings, how close to people, that kind of things that they can do. If the person does have a registered drone and is a certified advanced pilot and can provide a certificate, then they can fly within 30 meters or 100 feet of people and buildings inside Warman. There wouldn't be anything to prohibit them. As far as law goes, it doesn't matter. The law doesn't care if it's 6 inches or 6,000 feet above Warman. It's all regulated by the federal government. So they would have to follow those exact same rules. And I would assume if it's a photography drone, it would have some fairly decent equipment on there. So they would have to follow that or follow the advanced operations guidelines. And that just to comment on the restricted airspace around Warman, that restricted airspace has been lifted. There used to be regulations in regards to the airfield in Martinsville that you couldn't fly within 5K of there, but that has been removed for, it's within 100 meters of that airfield now. So you would be free to fly if you're following the rules. I'm not sure if that helps or not, but that's, or if anybody has any more questions.
Paul, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that this may not be the best year for that to happen. We have taken steps to try to cut some of our budget, our operating budget already, and we're not fertilizing our ball diamonds, our sports fields, some of those parks with irrigation. So we're not going to have that aesthetic look to it that we would really want to promote. So just from that kind of being out there, that the aesthetics of it isn't going to be top notch like we usually do and we usually have in our parks. We are cutting back on that just so that we don't have to mow 2 or 3 times a week and stuff like that. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, and Kendall.
I just wanting to note privacy for our residents, that they would know that there's a drone around our buildings or on our taking pictures of our property in case they get too close. I think that the residents should know, so maybe something on Facebook would be helpful.
Okay, so Dawn, where do we go from here? Sounds like a lot of questions to ask.
I think I will have a discussion with Rocky and see, does he have it like all the regulations, if he has everything to follow those regulations beforehand. And to Paul's comment too, I mean, maybe we should wait another year before we take photos of our parks and our stuff like that if our place isn't going to be as beautiful as it normally is.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving down to Public Works. Jason.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. Only things I guess I would like to add that I can update on my report is that parts have come in now for the fountains in Lake Off Crystal Springs there. We'll be able to install those hopefully later this week. We'll pick up parts this week and get them ready. So they'll look a little more, they'll be a little more beautified. And I guess just a training update for my staff. I haven't been able to give them the training I'd like to. It's all been put on hold now due to this COVID-19 social distancing. Hopefully as soon as this lifts off a bit, we can do some updates. There's some chainsaw training that staff need for trimming trees. There's the equipment training that new staff requires for operating our skid steer, backhoe, things like that. And there's a G license for pulling that Mini X we purchased. We were going to train 2 staff for that. So that's been put on hold for now. And we hope to be able to do that soon. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Is there any questions for Jason? Kendall?
Just a comment. The crosswalks and the painting. It's great that they're coming back to do that, which has been highly trafficked and so fading. And the fact that we can see them after a long winter is awesome. So I'm just really happy about that.
Yeah, I met with Nigel, and he could definitely see the wear more than he had anticipated, and it's just due to the high traffic and aggressive snow removal we have, and the extra probably salt and the gravel and whatnot. So he said, yeah, you come back and touch up those faded spots, not the whole thing, but just those faded spots. So that's good to hear.
Okay, Richard.
Yes, thank you. Just a question there regarding the green yard waste, the yard waste bins. With this year, it seems like there's a little bit of an issue of cleanliness that has kind of developed today with quite a few bags being left behind, likely because the bins are full. With this year, I was just wondering if you can comment as to how things are going over there generally. And a second question would be, one of those bins is, let's say it's only accessible from from one side, not both. Is there any way that we can get a bin that can be accessed from both sides?
Yeah, I think to answer your first question, unfortunately, the bins were not full this morning. I went to have a look and I seen all the bags laying there in the branches, and I took some photos and sent them to Bob and to Brad as well. And the bins, the one was quite full with some branches, but more could be put in, and the other one was, about 2/3 full. They could have definitely taken some more material, but someone has just chosen to dump instead of put them in the bin, so that's unfortunate. Our staff are going to pick them up today after they're done picking up garbage at the snow dump, which we usually have the summer students do, but so we're a little short staffed trying to keep up with everything. As far as that bin, I believe the reason that there was only openings on the one side, and maybe Brad can help me out or correct me if I'm wrong, was just so that staff, or not, sorry, staff, but people couldn't hide behind that south side and then just not, maybe put things in there they shouldn't. It seems to me that there was a reason that there was only openings on the one side. Maybe Brad might have a different opinion on that one.
Yeah, I have nothing to add in that regard, Chris.
Yeah, certainly one of the things there that I did notice with that bin that it only has the access from the one side is it is, certainly tough to fill it up, right? Because it certainly limits capacity in terms of trying to get over any branches that might be there, or trying to throw grass or whatever you have, whether it's bags of leaves or whatever, certainly to the backside of it. So with this year, it certainly limits the capacity, and I think that there also certainly leads to a little bit of frustration for anybody that sees that, that it is full, but, they can't get, or, let's say, like it's not full up and behind, and they can't quite get there themselves. So, certainly, from the, from that side of things, I would like to see if there's any opportunity for us, just to see if we can actually address that.
Yep, I can request that the bins be open on both sides. I can talk to Sarah later today on that. That's what we can do.
Okay, Trevor?
We hear a few times a year between Public Works about this particular area and Recreation from some other few trouble spot areas. Items of vandalization and not following the rules and dumping and things like that. And I'm wondering if it's not time to really look into having some high quality cameras, whether they be permanent placements in trouble areas or ones that we can move around randomly from trouble area to trouble area. Because rather than trying to change whole policies on how we deal with things, it might be better just to catch who's causing the problems.
So what I understand, this morning I asked Brad, and he said that there was a camera that they could set up by the bins. And I think Parks has cameras set up by the skate park that they've recorded footage and they've passed it on to the RCMP. So there is some cameras that have caught some vandalism.
Yeah, we do have cameras. By law enforcement has, I believe, 2 cameras which are remote and we can move around and are motion activated. We have used them at this location in the past, and we were chatting this morning about potentially putting them up. It doesn't always, it's not 100% foolproof. Depending on the time of day, the amount of light, the way they come in, you sometimes don't get all the information you need, but it has proved to be valuable in certain situations. I think the park's vandalism has been the best case.
Do you have anything to add, Paul?
Yeah, just that we do have them at the skate park location, and it has come in handy a number of times. We find a lot of the vandalism is happening in areas where you can't set up a camera. You'd have to install some kind of a pole or whatever that has multiple cameras off to catch traffic in and out of parking lots or in the bush or wherever. But yeah, it's certainly something that we would love to have, but I would imagine the price tag coming with putting cameras everywhere we want, where we see kids gathering and maybe doing stuff that isn't so appropriate, it would run us a fair price tag.
Okay, good conversation. Okay, thank you, Jason. Did you want to talk at all about your damaged traffic signs? Do you have any idea what's happening there? Or?
I do have one update just from RCMP on Friday. He just let me know that they have a possible suspect that they're investigating and looking into. No more stop signs have been removed thus far, but they do have a lead that they're looking at, and he'd update me as soon as he could.
So are you guys able to clean this stuff off the sign?
No, as soon as we try and apply some graffiti removal, the redness of the sign comes right with it, so it destroys the sign. Yeah.
Oh, geez, that's too bad. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, moving down to recreation, Paul.
Good afternoon, Mayor Spence, members of council. You have my report in front of you. It is a, I apologize for that. Sorry about that. I do have a couple of things within my report. First is a correction. I reported in there that Anytime Fitness was open for business. They are not open for business. I apologize for putting that in there. They are within phase 3, and so they've been doing some upgrades and whatnot to their equipment. So they are not open for business. The second one is the BMX Raceway. They have approached the city about doing an improvement to the racetrack, and that is adding the asphalt to the corners, which I applaud them for both of their ventures coming forth. They're both really aggressive in trying to make that track and that raceway the best that it possibly can be. They're looking at going after some big events. And so with that comes asphalt corners, which are usually found in higher end tracks. And the sound booth there that I included in my report, the concept of it, it looks absolutely beautiful. They supplied some plans, which I attached as Appendix A. Very beautiful, all of it. Coming from the Parks Department, we have no issues with the improvements to the track. That is trying to make the best track that they possibly can. And the sound booth, we have no problem with the appearance of it and the plans that have gone forward. And I've already had a discussion with Brad a little bit about it. We would have to do like we normally do. It's a capital improvement that happens on our land. So we would have to do an agreement with them on that.
Okay. So does anyone have any questions of that? Kendall?
Paul, I just have one question on your report, and that's the spray park can't be used, you said, and is getting upgrades, and it can't be used till phase 4. But is there a date in which you're planning to have that ready so that when phase 4 happens, it can be used?
We're just getting the final pricing back from Surecom Industries. Little back history to the spray park. The spray park has always been kind of a pain in Jason's department's butt when we get lots of rain, and it seems to back up in there. And so they try to eliminate where it drains into. And so last year, Public Works asked if they could change the drainage system, and they did that. And so this is the repairs to that. It's not an upgrade. It's just a repair to it. So we plan on having that done by the middle of June and ready to go if that happens.
Okay, great.
It might be, but once again, we're going to talk about savings and whatnot. This might be something that we decide that we're not going to open at all and maybe move that into a repairs that happened in 2021. So, but we'll have that discussion with Manager Smith and Amanda. So,
okay.
Richard?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a question regarding the BMX capital improvements. Would that contract actually come to council for approval and ratification?
No, it's just an improvement that would come to me that I would sign off on. No different than some of the signage and stuff and the shed that they put on there. So I just felt it was necessary to report to council that they want to do this. This is pretty aggressive by them and a big stretch and a big jump for them to take that track to the next level.
So certainly for that then, let's say concerns around maintenance and let's say removal if they were to go to, let's say defunct or whatever, this year, those would all be costs that you would protect the city from?
Yep, those are right in the original contract that are their improvements. And actually the asphalt corners and stuff will decrease the amount of maintenance that is needed to the track. So it's actually a win-win, and it alleviates some of the pressure put on their board to do track maintenance and keep it up. So it's, like I said, it's a win-win, those asphalt corners. The upkeep and everything else of the sound booth coming in, that once again, we'll do a capital improvement with them.
You're a popular man.
I'm a popular man. Sorry about that. And we'll make sure that those are written into the agreement that they're required to do the maintenance and everything on it. and at time that the BMX club should become defunct, that building becomes property of the city. And we do that we've got buildings that right now are with minor ball, slow pitch, and soccer.
Yep. Perfect. Thank you.
Gary, did you have something?
Just a quick one. I also have the same one Kendall had with the spray park. The only thing that I want to say with that, I had it as a priority thing just from the vantage point of fixing it while nobody's using it instead of fixing it in the middle of a summer or something, whatever else it might be. That if that's at all possible, but if it doesn't hold over a winter, then I understand it may make sense to do it next year if that's where our timeline takes us. So that was the only thing I was going to mention, is that if there's any possibility of it opening, then I think we want to get it done. So there's not, okay, it can open, but now we have to close it.
Yeah, and that was our initial goal, was to get it done and be on it and be ready. If we push for it now, we'd have it done probably by the end of next weekend. So it's very minimal. There's a little bit of landscaping around that's going to take a little bit more time, but the usage of the facility itself is obtainable to use before the end of June, or beginning of June rather, if we really pushed it.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, thank you.
Did you want to talk about minor hockey's request?
Yes. Okay, you want to lead right into that? We have it right in front of us.
Yeah, this is, I had a very limited conversation with Vancini, which is the president of Warman Minor Hockey, about their letter. I knew the letter was coming. I didn't know all the details within the letter. But reading over the letter, just like everyone else has, they're looking for two changes to happen for their operational year next year. The first is the rate for non-prime ice. Right now, our definition of primetime ice is 3 to 10:30 in the evenings, and then after that to close. And on the weekdays, it's from open in the morning till 3 p.m. And so there was confusion on parts of minor hockey. We already dealt with putting a freeze on the non-prime ice time for the midget AAAs for the next couple of years, so that they can get established, and we'll hold that ice time of that non-prime time. And that non-prime time, they thought went to closer to 5, and it doesn't. It ends at 3. But their initial discussion was that they were potentially going to be operating this during school time to have practices. And so they have requested that time from 3:30 to 4:45 is when they want to have initial practices. And they've been working with some of the other user groups on this, that they would like to have that the definition of non-prime time extend to at least 5 o'clock. Now, from my standpoint on that in operations of my facilities, we have other groups that have been using that ice time from as early as 3:15 on, and that is Warman Ringette and the Warman Osler Skating Club. And so if we go forward, you are kind of setting a precedence that, hey, they're getting the ice for a lesser rate, or that we've made accommodations for them. And some of these other groups, like the Ringette, which are fairly new themselves, and in their inaugural operating season, did pay the full pop for that ice time starting at 4 o'clock. So there are some things to think about with that. And then going forward, Vance did make mention that they were having some difficulties raising some funds, and this was supposed to be their big campaign to go out and get some sponsorship, get some people to donate and volunteer time, all of that stuff, and to run their fundraisers for their operating season. Now, this is their inaugural season, and so they're going to have more expenses here than what they have any other year. And I see they've asked the city for a loan in the amount of $42,000 with the intention to repay $6,000 per year over the next 7 years.
All right, let's open the floor for some discussion here. Anyone want to make a comment? Richard?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Spence. Yeah, certainly in terms of like the non-prime time ice rates, obviously with this year, I think that's something that we can look at and see if we can make that fair for the other two user groups that Paul had mentioned. Just to see if we could, certainly make it fair for, for that time, whether or not we basically just, say that that our non-prime time hours are certainly extended, to let's say negate that particular issue. As for the loan, with this here, I do think that is rather precedent setting. I'm not sure that it's something that, that we'll really want to get into in terms of lending money out to user groups, that use our facilities, regardless of the status of their game. So, like there again, while I certainly have some sympathy for them in terms of when it is that they're getting started, with the COVID crisis that's currently upon us. But this year, lending out money in that regard, I do have a bit of an issue with that and find that a little bit precedent setting.
Paul, so I need to ask, would they be bumped? Would Ringette and Warman Osler Figure Skating Club, would they be bumped?
No, they are.
They would not be bumped.
They're not bumped. No, they're working with each other in an exchange of ice to make it work. Okay. So there's no bumping of the original groups in there. They're coming in, taking up ice time that wasn't initially used.
Okay. So then how do you feel? I just need to know before we move on to the next comment. How do you feel about making it fair for those three? Or how do you feel about that? What's your comment?
It will have a little bit of effect. It's a $45 an hour change. So you're looking probably somewhere in the range of 9 to 10 hours. So that's about $450 a week in operational and lost revenues if you go that way.
Okay, Gary?
Yeah, I was going to look at it a little bit different and say that, can we go back to them with the idea of maybe starting earlier too, to stay out of the prime time? Because I know the players have all requested from the high school to have fifth period off, which means they could be on the ice by 2:45 in my mind. Now, again, I realize there's logistics with some of that stuff, but could they potentially move themselves back into a non-prime? Because that does open it up as we go here. And, even if, as we look at different levels of hockey, I know when we were looking at junior hockey and things like that was going to be probably true daytime ice, where this now, I realize they're students, but they are asking for concessions with how we set up their timetable that might be able to allow them to get going earlier. So I don't know. It's it really is a budgetary decision, and it's going to hit back on recreation along the way. So I'm glad you asked for Paul's opinion on it. And is it doable? I'm supportive if it's doable in a good way, but I'm leery to sort of give up money that we need in the recreation budget as we're looking to add more space and opportunities.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Yes, I think that we do need to hear what you have to say about it, Paul, because we are talking about services and about tightening our budget and about all these things for the next year. So here, the idea of taking yet some more money out of that pot is concerning. And then also giving loans, I agree with Richard. I think that's precedent setting, and I'm not in favor of it at all.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any comments? No? Oh, Trevor?
I agree that to me the loan is just, I think that's putting ourselves in a place that we're really not intended to be. Like, I mean, the city is not a bank. And as far as the ice time goes, I thought that they had planned, when they applied for this franchise, that they had planned on having daytime ice. And that was part of our supporting their going for this franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And that is correct. I think the initial discussions that we had with Vance was that we were going to hold that non-prime ice rate at $150 an hour for the next couple of years, with the intentions that that was going to be from that 2 o'clock on type ice slot that was going to be in there. And that would have fallen right into perfect, been in the non-prime ice. Going from that, the prime ice starts at 3 o'clock. We've had groups start at 3:15. For many years, the skating club started at 3:15. Currently right now at 4 o'clock, the Ring Ant Association starts at 4. So we are changing some of that stuff to happen, and user groups are finding a way to utilize that ice right after school. So as Mr. Philipchuk has conveyed to us, is that if they're looking to do some changes and to their school scheduling, you know, I really am going to be scraping to get every ounce of revenue I possibly can. So if council decides that, you know, $450 to $600 a week is something they're willing to take on and take as a loss in revenues, then, you know, we can move forward with that. If not, then I say we hold fast on what we have for our definitions and stay as is.
Well, will you be able to go back to them, Paul, and talk to them about getting in there early and see how viable that is?
Yeah, we've had a good conversation about it, and they were really thinking that what Councillor Philipchuk has said to me was really news to me, because what the message I was getting from President Heating was that they were really concerned, and it was important for them to be in school, and they didn't want kids to miss any portion of school. So if they're asking for concessions to be out of school early and be on the ice by 2:30, that's plenty of time for them to be there. And if we need to change what our definition is half an hour to accommodate it, I think that's fine. But to change it from a 2-hour time period, I think that's asking a lot, and that's a stretch.
Okay, Ryan?
As far as the reduced ice, so I do agree with that if there's flexibility from the school, and there probably is going to be kids coming from different schools, but overall for the facility, I don't think we want to get into unfair treatment around that, because we only have limited ice, and until we get another rink built, we're going to have limited ice. I think it's important that if we can move that back for a team like this, I think that's a good use of the ice. And I'm just looking at Gary, and I don't think you're there a lot. You're retiring, Gary, but if you could put in a good word to be flexible, allow kids to get practice with schedules. I think that is the best way to handle that. It might not be perfect from there, but I think that's the best for everybody. As far as the loan, of course, I come from a bit of a vested interest. I am a hockey guy. I'm a sports guy. I love what they do for communities. And I just was thinking around the parallel, and you have to bear with me here, but to the doctor retention program, where we think there's a benefit to the community, and I really do think there will be with a successful team, where if you create a winning environment here for the kids in a development perspective, but also for people wanting to go and support a team, there really is a benefit to the community to help them get off on the right foot and get the right types of kids, because it is a very, very competitive league. For this age group, this is pretty much in Canada as good as it gets. And you will get a lot of, you will get people coming from out of town to watch this. Half of Martinsville minor hockey is going to show up and hopefully buy our McDonald's and not theirs while they're here. So, from my perspective, I just think there is an economic spinoff to having a sporting team, and it's a loan. It's not a grant. It's a loan that, to me, again, we've put things in place where we loan other organizations money because we think there's a community benefit to doing it. So I would support the loan, being that it's a loan, but again, I come from that direction, that I really do think there's a benefit to the community and to the organization to do that. So that's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Richard?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to kind of build off of the point there from Councillor Jones, just a question for you, Paul. In regards to our lottery grant, has this club secured any funding from that aspect, or certainly looked at that? And is that a viable opportunity?
The community grant program, because it is a minor hockey team, they do it as a governing body. And so Warman Minor Hockey has maxed out every year. The max that they can get out of the loan is $5,000. So there's no real relief from that standpoint. Just to touch base a little bit on what Councillor Jones had mentioned too about money going back in the community, we have to remember that a lot of these kids, and they announced a lot of these kids' names here the other day that they've signed up, they're coming from other communities. They're going to be billeting within our community, and minor hockey is paying those billets to take those boys on. So that money is going to go right back into our grocery stores and our gas stores and stations and everything else within our community for those boys billeting here. So they're injecting every month thousands of dollars back into the community. So that's just another thing that I'd throw out there.
Okay. Kendall?
I won't repeat for the first thing because I think we've talked about the ice time. Maybe in regards to the loan, is it possible that we could kind of maybe approach the chamber and do a kind of combined thing with them, so that it's evenly distributed and has the business aspect of support for this team, and then we become a business sponsor just like other businesses. To me, it kind of brings the community spirit and meets the need, and I think that would possibly maybe work instead of just us holding the loan of 42,000.
Mm-hmm. Gary?
Just the other one a little bit. Beardy's actually, any players that played at Beardy's also have fifth period off. A little bit about the loan. I'm not totally against it. I'm a big advocate for the program. It's the best hockey out there. AAA midget is the best hockey, hardest working kids out there. I need to know that they've exhausted other opportunities or other options too, because I think this is a business sponsorship type of thing that could potentially happen. That and just that going through all the fundraising we did with the Legends Center, that you just see that sometimes you need somebody to step up, whether it's one of the parents' families or whatever it might be, that they have a vested interest, that somebody else, a third party, takes on that loan. It's just one of those things. All of our groups, every single one of them, offer the same things as this one does. And I could start with the ones, from cheer to this to that. All of them bring people into the community, and they do great things. But we've got to be careful that we are lending out taxpayer money with this situation or any. But if they've exhausted all other opportunities, then I guess I would need to see that they've had rejection letters along the way before probably consider it. I sure don't want them not to make it. Their success is really important to me that way.
Okay. Are we ready to move on? Now, I understand that RCMP are sitting with Bob right now. So if we could move our economic development and Warman Fire report to after the RCMP, and we'll go right into the RCMP report.
Good afternoon, everybody. How is everyone?
We're good. How about you?
Good. Staying busy, that's for certain. I submitted my reports. What I'll start off initially talking to you guys about today. You should have them, I'm hoping. Comparables from April and March of 2019, 2020. Without getting into them too in-depthly, it's pretty easy to see that we're down probably 75 to 80 calls for service in both months. But I would simply put that towards COVID over the last few weeks that we had. Again, there's no major trends that I've been overly concerned about heading into May here in the Warman area. We do have a few B&Es throughout our detachment area, which we were predicting, as well as a small increase in our domestic violence. Other than that, around the Horn, we've been fairly steady, and we're definitely picking up over the last few weeks. which we anticipate even starting today will start to get back to a little bit more normal. In regards to the HR staffing aspect of it for detachments, we stay status quo. We are short one constable due to a retirement. However, the new individual has been named and transferred. We're just waiting for him to sell his house in Wynyard, Saskatchewan. And we still have 2 members that are on pat leave well into next year. So the forecast for our human resources is pretty good. And we survived any potential illnesses or isolation that needed to be done. So far on that aspect, we're doing good. Thirdly, hopefully you've all started to notice since April 1st, our visibility has been drastically increased. So we're hoping that you've seen more police vehicles in and around your neighborhoods at all times of night when we want to be seen. And the last update I'd have for you here is that the renovations are nearing completion. We're hoping by the end of next week, we should be operational, if not the beginning of June, back in Warman, which is good for us because we're still waiting word from our headquarters in Regina when we're going to open up our detachments. There's been a little hesitation with that. I thought maybe last week we were starting to move towards it, but those policies, procedures are still coming up.
Okay, so I'm going to ask council if they have any questions about anything that Jan has just mentioned, and then we're going to go into another conversation afterwards. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. So Dion, you and I had a conversation about our youth hanging out in different parts of our community and the complaints that we're starting to get again. One of the hot spots, of course, is the Legend Center, and they're now hanging out there. And the question that came back to me, and oh, by the way, I have had some emails from some young teens just wanting to know if there is places that they can hang out. So I did send kind of a strong email back to one of them because he felt that we weren't being very fair, but I kind of explained what the city is going through. And so I guess the question that came back to me is there a place that we would feel like we could support the kids being pushed to? And I know we did talk about the entrance to Warman, the train monument area. And we thought that we'd further that conversation with the RCMP today. So Dion, do you want to talk to how, I know it's difficult to catch these people that the loitering isn't quite as much of a problem as the stunting, the racing, the littering and all that kind of stuff. If they were people that were just pulling up into a parking lot and having a conversation and hanging out, that would be one thing, but that's not really what's happening. There's a lot of other stuff that's going along with that. So what is, in your mind, how can we tackle this? What can we do about this?
Well, I guess at first what I would look at is the historical aspect of it, where they've been at the Legend Center, they've been in the industrial park, they've also been up north. I'm not going to say that we go there and physically chase them out. We actually build relationships with them. And then it's just, they're relocating. And they're going to continue to do that. And that's just the group as a whole. And depending on how things go here with COVID, I anticipate that this is going to continue quite strongly over the next few months, at least until we get to winter. Because the social activities that the youth can do, there is very little right now. Bowling alleys don't know if they're opening, movie theaters, et cetera, et cetera. So you're right, this problem is going to be around. We do have different tools that we could utilize for enforcement action, no different than your loitering bylaw, our Traffic Safety Act. The problem that we get into is we have to be there to see it. And usually the youth that are causing these problems, it's only going to be about 10% of the population. And the timing for us to get there, or to see who dropped the McDonald's bag, or who was stunting to running the stop signs leaving the Legend Center, and who's doing it late at night. It's hard for us to get a license plate or identify the driver because, of course, the youth aren't going to be cooperative. So therefore, looking at the problem solving of it, and we don't have necessarily a solution, and we don't want to recommend that you guys build or council build something for them because there'd be no guarantee that they'd be there, but almost unofficially identifying a spot that when we chase them out of the Legend Center or we get called to go there, and we can go in and break it up and say, okay, guys, you got to get moving on. Unofficially, you know, the city has said you guys can go to the dog park parking lot and park over there. And then maybe that will work to solve the problem. And even then, I can't guarantee it will because it could just be conditional until they decide to go relocate somewhere else. And that won't take very long for them to do either, but it's definitely a start in the right direction. Realizing that in the north end, there's not that much population there, and in the south end, we have problems with the industrial businesses. And at the Legend Center, of course, the two condominiums across the street are complaining. I spoke to you, ma'am, about a plan that we were putting in place that started today. So it's an operational plan that we have two members dedicated to, and we're going to run it for a short time here to see what data we can collect and what enforcement action we could utilize. I'm doing it somewhat covertly, so I'm reluctant to share what exactly that is, but I can tell you it's a priority for our detachment.
So if we were to kind of unofficially move them to the dog park, would the RCMP be able to monitor that area in a way so that it's not going to have a lot of problems there? Like I'm worried about actually racing or stunting right on Central, right when traffic's coming into Warman.
And that could be a challenge too. It took us a while to figure out how we're going to do enforcement at the Legends. If I had to rate all 4 spots, I'd say the Legends would be easier for us to get eyes on. It's now to have the manpower to do it. The dog park, you're right, would be a challenge, but we could find a way around that. But we wouldn't be as effective at the Legend as we're hoping to be at the Legend Center, just because there's so many venues that we could hide at. And in the northern part and the southern part of town, that would be nearly impossible, besides us driving up. And everybody would be aware, or it would be common sense that as soon as we pull into town or even drive by with the police car, we're going to get half an hour of good behavior. And if they hear sirens or lights leaving town, then that pretty much flies the flag that they can do what they want. And that's when your 10% will start squeaking their tires. So the dog park is an option that is worthwhile trying. It's just whether or not, and again, this is an unofficial idea. I wouldn't put it in paper or put it in the newspaper or anything of that nature. But as a discussion of where I could tell my members that when we are building the relationships and telling them to go, you know, we can say, hey, go here, or a parking lot on the other side of the highway somewhere that they can go out and we can remind them, don't be stupid while you're there, don't loiter or litter, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, Council, do you have some comments or ideas? I know you were supposed to be thinking about this all weekend, and I know that you did, so put some of your comments.
Thank you. So, you know, certainly with our loitering bylaw, let me just ask, like, is that certainly giving you the tools to do the job that you need to do, or is there some actual adjustments that need to be made within that?
No, I think the loitering bylaw is well worded and it's effective for us. It's a tool that we can utilize. Charges haven't been laid under it as of yet, but we can. No different than the Traffic Safety Act, and it's just a matter of collecting our evidence for what we need in court. So we haven't got there usually. And here's the problem. When we pull up, and I'll tell you, we're a lot better than what we used to be responding to these complaints. But when we pull up, everybody behaves. If they're under 10 people and they're not causing a problem, we are recommending that they leave. If they're over 10 people, the problem comes just when we're not there. So once we leave or we go to another call for service, it becomes an issue. It's not the tool itself, it's just the problem of how we're going to solve it and deal with the kids, because they're not going to go away. And if they're behaving and not causing a problem or not in huge numbers, then unless we're wanting to just charge them for simply loitering, we'll be thrown in for a comparison to the people across the street at Tim Hortons using the Wi-Fi every night.
Mhm.
They're loitering too. So, and they're adults. So are we ticketing them? But and that hasn't become an issue, but you want to watch your precedents on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Trevor, and then Gary.
Again, this is back to my comments earlier about cameras. I think if we are going to have an unofficial location, we want to make sure that we have cameras up so that it's pretty much it's going to get plates and identify whoever comes in and out of that area, so that if there's problems in the area that we're pushing them to, that the RCMP have the tools they need to deal with it with the footage.
Gary?
I guess some of it is a little bit of enforcement too, because even looking at your numbers, seeing that there's one speeding ticket, I know we've all heard some speeders as we go, but I think I'm probably the Legends is probably the place, and it's not the non-lawbreakers that I'm worried about. It's more, I'm tied to, Clubhouse and Centennial are two key places where there's double lanes, so people can be side by side and coming in where you can hear a lot of stuff. So I think you probably answered it right at the beginning by more visibility, few more tickets, because there's a few people that get it. And in this day and age right now with SGI's cost of tickets and points, the word gets out there. And then I think the relationship stuff is outstanding, because I think when you see garbage around, it's the relationship going up to them and say, this is a problem, guys. And we can't have this going out there. It's not as much to give tickets in that situation, but it's, you look after your places here too. You look after your city of Warman, and it's a teachable moment, as you guys have talked about the relationships. So when you have those talks about saying, this puts a spotlight on you guys that we have to be here more. And so I think the visibility helps. The stuff that is non-traffic related, like garbage and that, I think is relationship stuff. But when they're squealing their tires and things like that, and that's whether it's the Legends or down Centennial or Clubhouse, I think that's two of the three key places that has to be, that speeding really happens here. So I think that maybe you're onto it by just having visibility, and then maybe not visibility, but it is some traps along the way. And a few people get tickets. You don't get a ticket if you don't break the law. So as much as they want to argue about it, if you're going 90 or 100K down down Centennial, you know what? There should be a consequence that everybody knows about, and the whole group would see it.
Okay, I guess, Paul, I'd like to ask you, since you manage the Legend Center and also kind of oversee the dog park, how do you feel about having kids hanging out? And do you see problems that you'd like to see addressed?
The only problems I have with the kids, I have no problem with kids going somewhere and hanging out. It's just the lack of respect that we have in not just at the Legend Center, but we have them hang out at the Diamond Arena, and we have them hang out in between the ball diamonds. And that's the garbage. It's frustrating for my staff to start their days by walking around and picking up after people all the time. It's we're not here a lot of the time when we hear the complaints that are directed basically to you, Mayor Spence. The complaints of loud music and the tires squealing, We don't have that. We see it at the Diamond Arena with the kids. They like to drift around the facility. They like to pull donuts and whatnot over because it's gravel over at the ball diamonds as well. That stuff requires us to take maintenance. And if we didn't do that maintenance, then our regular users would be complaining to us about that. But our biggest thing that we have going for it is the disrespect and the garbage just dropping out of the windows. And honestly, we've had game cameras up and they park absolutely so close together that you can't see garbage drop out of their vehicles. And when they pull in, there's not a sniff of garbage around. And when they pull out, there are full bags of McDonald's and Burger King and everything all over the place. So we start our day. This weekend, it was interesting because we watched it all weekend long, and there was nothing, no garbage, nothing there. I don't know if any complaints came in about it, but so we usually tie it to if there's garbage, they've been there. So that's our biggest complaint, Mayor Spence.
Okay, well, this is a hard situation because I mean we were all young once. We know, and this is a difficult time. I think our youth do need to have a place to be able to hang out. I mean, we have places to hang out. We just want them to be respectful and not be endangering themselves or anyone else. I mean, that's probably the biggest concern. So I don't know where we go from here. I just don't. Kendall?
I'm going to throw another monkey wrench into this, and that is well, living up north, I see it. I see what happens up north, but there is another aspect to this, and that is there's a group of men, and these are adults that head up to the far corner where it's boxed in, and there's about 8 or 9 cars, men, and they get their lawn chairs out and they sit in a circle, and they loiter up there. So to me, is if you're going to hit the youth, you got to hit the adults, and to me, it comes into this COVID thing, and who looks after that? Who enforces that? And maybe they're doing it right. I don't know, but it's if you get all this stuff happening, it's hard to enforce one part of the population and not enforce the other. So I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I think that's our point though, Kendall. If they're just sitting in lawn chairs or just sitting in their cars and they're not doing anything that's dangerous or disrespectful, I don't think we've got a problem with that, do we? I guess, council, do we have a problem with them just hanging out?
Well, I go to the fact of what Paul just said. Up north in that enclosed area, there is garbage galore, and because I walk my dog up there, and it's disgusting. But I don't know what else to do. So,
Paul,
go.
You're on mute, Paul.
Sorry about that. This is somewhat an animal that's created by COVID, and we see lots of that. And we see lots of that at the Legend Center too, where there's a group of young girls that come and they throw out their blankets and they sit in the parking lot and they chat and they leave, and there's no garbage. We've been dealing with the garbage for a couple of years now, and it's directly from the youth, and that's been our key focus right now. Is we have seen it at the Diamond Arena, and we've seen it at the Ball Diamonds, and we've seen it at the Legend Center, and it is the youth that are utilizing that, and it's just like what I said. It's not COVID related, but this is one thing that they're doing that they can do during this time. But it shouldn't change the fact that you should have some respect for the place that you're at, and the garbage can sit in your vehicle until you get home and you can take it out. It's the stuff that's being thrown out the windows and left there when they leave. That's the big issue to us. The noise and the screeching of tires, well, that's, to me, that's a police issue altogether. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Well, I'm thinking too that maybe we could use some sort of communication strategy to talk about being respectful and being safe. I don't know where we would put it, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, but somewhere where we could at least put it out there that we need people to cooperate with that, people, whether they're young or old. So maybe that's something that Aaron could work on. That would be something anyway. Any other ideas, Dion?
No, not at the moment. I'll go back to a couple of options here, and it just came to my mind now. One option at the Legends Center would be to put up a couple signs as you enter the parking lot, that the parking lot is under video surveillance. Just by putting up those signs, that might help with our enforcement campaign that we're doing. At the same time, don't put them up, don't put a sign up at the dog park or let anybody know that there is a camera there, because as an alternative, if council chooses to go that way, as soon as they see that we're setting them up to go to the dog park and that we've put a camera up there, they'll almost feel like it's entrapment and they won't go there. They'll go to the ball diamonds if they're not already. In regards to the northern side with adults getting out of their vehicles and probably social distancing with under 10 of them, which is not necessarily illegal at this point because they probably can't do it in their own garage because their garage isn't big enough, or who knows, maybe the neighbors laying complaints that they're too loud. It's going to be the beverage that they have in their hand in a public place that I'm going to be concerned about. That being said, COVID has closed the parks down, so there's no option there either. I think problem solving.
The parks aren't closed, Dion. The parks are still open.
Well, then I'm not too certain. I would like to know why they're, when they are in the north. And looking at Curtis here, we haven't had any complaints of adults in those areas. It's all been youth. And another part of this is the PR aspect of it. It would be easier for me to approach the 10 guys that are sitting on the road visiting social distancing and getting a couple of their names, and all we got to do is remind them, make sure you take your garbage with you because we already know that you guys are here, right? And we can do that with the youth as well. So if we get a little bit more attitude with the youth, well, that's not mine. Versus the adults will be, yeah, for sure, we'll make sure it's clean. So that's where we're hoping the enforcement side of it, where I've given pretty strong direction as to what we're going to do at the Legends, will temporarily solve the problem, and we'll get a couple of those tickets, hopefully, issued to the 10% of the people that are problems. And if we don't, then we're almost disproving or proving that there isn't a problem at the Legends. But I'm yet undetermined on that until I have some data of how many hours we were there and set up and what we've put in place. So it'll be a while for me to tell you that.
Okay, thank you. I see in our chat that Trevor had a question, but Trevor, I don't quite understand it. Can you read it, please? You're on mute.
This is a joke.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll wait and see, Dion, how it goes with your enforcement and what you're doing now. Does anyone have any other ideas or suggestions, or we can maybe go to some sort of communication strategy just to get people to be more respectful? Kendall?
Up north, is it possible to maybe ask D&H or the contractor to maybe have video out in that far corner where he's put the three-way fence and there's only one way you can see things, that maybe that would help?
I don't know. Brad, can you do that?
I'd probably suggest that because the road's still kind of public property, that if we were going to do anything, it came from the city and not the private developer.
Okay.
Just my suggestion, though.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay. Well, we've had a long discussion here. I don't think we're too much farther ahead, but at least we know where we all sit. Thank you, Dion. Do you have anything else that you wanted to bring up, or?
All I'm going to say is, or suggest is, continue calling us. We've got over 30 of us. It's from some experience to some junior members. So, and they all have different ideas or might suggest it to different people, or as we're trying to solve the problem. It's also to diffuse the frustration with people. But I would still like my office to know. And it doesn't mean we're going to get there all the time. Even if we're just flying the flag or we just drive by or they see it, that's better than nothing. And if we don't know about it, we might not even be in the north end, depending on what our call volumes are like. So if you can keep calling us, that would be great.
Okay.
I do want to say thank you for your visibility up north. I've noticed it. So I want to say thank you.
Okay, thank you. Take care. Keep well. Okay, now we're back up to economic development. Josh.
Good afternoon, Mayor Spence and members of council. In front of you is my report. Most of it is for information purposes only. There is several updates, though, I'll provide you. First, on the business reopening video, that was launched yesterday, actually, in lieu of the phase 2 reopening today. So I hope you've all had a chance to see it. It's a great grouping of local businesses in the region, along with several of the organizations on the task force. So I'm quite proud of it. The second piece is there was new information announced regarding the SECRA program. So this relates to the chamber rent request portion of my report. I don't have the specifics as there's more coming out. However, I do believe that there is an update on non-mortgaged properties as well as the applicability of the program to provincial and municipal organizations. So it should help provide some clarification once I have that information moving forward.
Okay. Is there any questions of Josh and his report? Anybody have anything? Guess not. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks.
Okay. Russ, you're next.
Hey, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. You have my report in front of you. It's pretty quick and painless. Things on the front line were fairly quiet there for a few weeks, and in the past 10 days have picked right back up to what I would call a normal volume of emergencies. So I know our partnership with the Saskatchewan Health Authority, they've got us set as far as PPE and that goes. I can advise Mayor and Council that we are responding to every call for service now, regardless if it is lights and sirens or not, because we do have the training and the PPE. And other than that, you have my report in front of you if you have any questions.
Okay, floor is open for questions. Is there any? Are we still awake or are we all frozen? Okay, thank you, Russ.
Oh, I think Richard's waving his hand there.
Oh, is he? Oh, sorry, Richard.
No, that's all right. So just a question then, as Russ, so in terms of being able to reply to all responses now and that kind of thing, would we be doing, let's say, more out of area, you know, like in terms of let's say anything in Corman Park, because we do have that ability, or does that change up anything in terms of our operations?
Right. Yeah, good question. We still respond as the first response for our fire protection area inside the RM of Corman Park. So whether it's inside the RM or inside the city, we'll be responding as we have been. It doesn't, I believe, like we haven't been asked to respond further than our regular districts just because we have the PPE and training. So just our particular area still.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, Russ.
Thank you.
Okay, communications.
Hi, good afternoon. In my report, I've given you the usual social media statistics and a few other updates about what's been happening. And I do want to just point out that if you haven't had a chance to look at the photos that people have sent in, they're all on the website. So I just wanted to point that out because there are some really nice photos and some pretty talented people living in Warman. So.
Is there any questions? Okay, thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have, is there any, we do have number 8, any council comments or inquiries? Kevin.
I actually could have asked this during economic development. I just didn't get a chance to. One of the questions that just came from the chamber, the task force meeting this morning, was just around local restaurants, and during sort of when they are going to be doing their reopenings, if there's any concerns coming from the city of Warman around just having, if people are going to be doing, expanding into their parking lots and that kind of thing for some additional seating, would there be any concerns coming from the city of Warman as far as that goes?
Well, I think you still have to be able to park, right? So are they saying they want to use that like for a patio?
Yeah, that would be sort of to, for restaurants that don't have a patio space, to maybe create a patio space to allow for some more capacity than what they currently would be able to do, because with what the distancing requirements are going to be, they're not going to be able to operate at the same capacities that they'd be at right now.
I think you have to be really careful with that, but
if I could just kind of jump in for a second on that one.
Sure.
I think it's definitely something we could potentially look at in like one-off situations, or sorry, not one-off, but like as a case-by-case type basis. I think it would slightly depend on kind of the availability of parking around the restaurant as well, just in terms of if they are taking up space, directly in front and that type of thing, but there's parking in close proximity, it might work. Whereas if you're located on a busier street and there isn't, available parking kind of right around, we might have to treat that one a little bit differently. But I think it's definitely something from a parking standpoint and a planning standpoint that, we could look at.
Yeah, because if you think about even looking across from City Hall at the Walk or Phoenix, and there's other businesses there, if they were to expand in their parking lot, where would people park? So it could be problematic. I think you'd have to really be careful in that approach. That's my thinking anyway. I mean, you want to be able to help where we can, but we don't want to create another problem either. So any other comments around that? Okay. I guess we're ready to welcome Chris. Is he here?
I just told him to join 2 minutes ago. He should be on here any second.
Okay.
If everyone wants to take just a 2-minute break, go to the bathroom or something, maybe he should be on by the time we get back.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, everyone take a break. 1 minute. Go and have your snacks. Dawn sent you some, didn't she? Josh,